Sarah bit her tongue and nodded politely as Patricia's friends tittered with laughter behind their wine glasses. The senator's wife, who Sarah suspected had never held elected office beyond PTA treasurer, gave her a dismissive once-over. "Some of us actually contribute to the community," Patricia added, adjusting her designer sunglasses. "This isn't a YMCA, dear." Walking away from the pool that evening, Sarah felt something beyond frustration simmering inside her. After 5 years of perfect neighborly behavior, volunteering for cleanup days, maintaining her garden to meticulous standards, even baking welcome cookies for newcomers, she was being treated like an unwelcome intruder in her own community. Back in her tastefully modest 2-bedroom home, Sarah scrolled through the HOA reservation system on her tablet. There it was. Confirmation number #8742P, time slot 6:37:30 p.m., Monday through Friday, paid quarterly in advance as required by the bylaws Patricia herself had drafted. Sarah had organized her entire work schedule around these evening swims. They were her sanctuary, her therapy, her one non-negotiable act of self-care. She poured herself a glass of water and glanced at the framed photo on her bookshelf. Herself on the podium at the state championships 10 years ago, before the shoulder injury that ended her competitive career. Swimming wasn't just exercise for Sarah. It was connection to her former self, the disciplined athlete who once had Olympic dreams. Her phone buzzed with a notification from the neighborhood watch app. Someone had posted about Patricia's latest crusade, citing 3 homeowners for excessive holiday decorations in April, despite Easter having been just 2 days ago. "Anyone else getting tired of the Reynolds reign of terror?" commented Mr. Patel from 2 streets over. The responses flooded in immediately. "She gave me a violation for my trash can being visible from the street during trash pickup." "Officer Reynolds followed my teenage son home last week, said he was driving suspiciously. He was going 2 miles per hour under the speed limit. My garden gnomes mysteriously disappeared after I voted against her pool furniture proposal." Sarah had always stayed out of neighborhood politics, believing that neutrality was the safest position. But as she read through dozens of similar complaints, she realized her silence had only enabled Patricia's growing power. The HOA had transformed from a community resource into Patricia's personal fiefdom. The next morning, Sarah woke before dawn and drove to the municipal records office. If Patricia wanted to play by the rules, Sarah would need to know exactly what those rules were and who had the authority to enforce them. 3 hours and several helpful government clerks later, Sarah emerged with copies of the original HOA charter, county regulations governing homeowners associations, and the state statutes on common interest communities. That evening, Sarah arrived at the pool 10 minutes early for her scheduled time. Patricia and her entourage were already there, lounging across every available chair. Sarah noticed something new, a handwritten sign taped to the gate. Pool RESERVED, Board Emergency Planning Session. Instead of retreating, Sarah scanned her access card and stepped onto the pool deck, her shoulders squared. She placed her swim bag on the only empty lounge chair and began unpacking her gear with deliberate movements. "Excuse me," Patricia called out, voice dripping with affected concern. "Can't you read the sign? We're conducting official business here." Sarah looked up, meeting Patricia's gaze directly for the first time. "Funny," she replied, her voice calm, but carrying across the deck. According to the HOA bylaws, Section 4, Paragraph 7, emergency board meetings require 24-hour notice to all homeowners, with minutes published within 48 hours. She pulled a laminated card from her bag. "I made a convenient summary of the key regulations. Would you like a copy?" Patricia's cheeks flushed crimson as her friends exchanged uncomfortable glances. This wasn't the usual script. Most residents backed down immediately when confronted. She stood, smoothing her designer cover-up with manicured hands. "I don't know what game you think you're playing," Patricia hissed, stepping closer. "But trust me when I say you don't want to make an enemy of me or my husband." The auditorium erupted into chaos. Patricia lunged for James, microphone still clutched in her manicured hand. "You weak, pathetic excuse for a man," she shrieked, all pretense of composure abandoned. After everything I've done for your career? Those dinner parties with the commissioner, the fundraisers for the Police Benevolent Association. Security personnel moved to separate them as residents watched in stunned silence. The HOA board president, hastily elected after Patricia's suspension, rapped his gavel desperately. Please, everyone, we need to maintain order. Sarah observed the scene from her seat beside the forensic accountant. She felt no satisfaction in watching the Reynolds marriage implode publicly, only a profound sense that justice, delayed for so long, was finally arriving in a torrent. Captain Washington approached the podium, her uniform crisp, her expression grave. In light of the evidence presented tonight and the ongoing internal investigation, I am authorized to inform this community that the county prosecutor has approved criminal charges against both Patricia and James Reynolds. The crowd fell silent. Patricia Reynolds will face charges of embezzlement, fraud, filing false financial statements, and conspiracy. James Reynolds will face charges of abuse of authority, unauthorized use of police databases, intimidation, and conspiracy. She paused, surveying the room. We take violations of public trust extremely seriously, especially when they involve sworn officers of the law. From the back of the room, a voice called out, "What about our money? The funds she stole?" Marcus Lee stepped forward with a folder. We've traced approximately 83% of the misappropriated funds. The bonding company that insures the HOA has agreed to cover verified losses while recovery efforts continue. He glanced at Patricia, who had collapsed into a chair, head in her hands. Mrs. Reynolds' personal assets, including the renovations to their home, will be subject to civil forfeiture proceedings. As the meeting continued with discussions of recovery and reform, Sarah slipped outside for a moment of quiet. The night air was cool against her flushed face. She'd never intended to become the center of a neighborhood revolution. She'd just wanted to swim her laps in peace. A throat cleared behind her. She turned to find James Reynolds standing awkwardly at the auditorium exit, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "Ms. Miller," he began, voice rough with emotion, "I want you to know, this isn't who I thought I was. When I joined the force 15 years ago, I wanted to protect people, not intimidate them." Sarah studied him, seeing not the imposing officer who had threatened her, but a broken man facing the consequences of 1,000 small compromises. "What happened?" she asked simply. He sighed, running a hand over his military short hair. At first, it was just little things. Running a plate for Patricia when someone parked in her spot. Looking up information on new neighbors she didn't like. Then it became checking backgrounds, finding leverage. He met her eyes directly. "The truth is, I was afraid of her, afraid of what would happen if I said no. Each time I crossed a line, the next one became easier." "That doesn't excuse what you did," Sarah said quietly. "No, it doesn't." He looked back toward the auditorium where his wife's voice could still be heard, arguing with her attorney. "I've lost everything that matters. My integrity, my career, probably my freedom for a while. But at least I can stop pretending." He extended his hand, not expecting her to take it. "Thank you for having the courage I didn't." Sarah looked at his outstretched hand, but didn't take it. "I didn't do this for you, Officer Reynolds." "I know," he replied, lowering his arm. "You did it for all the Mrs. Abernathys and their garden gnomes." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "For what it's worth, I never touched those gnomes. Patricia did that herself." As he walked away toward the parking lot, Sarah thought about the complex web of power, fear, and corruption that had entangled their peaceful community. It wasn't as simple as good versus evil. It never was. Even Patricia hadn't started as a villain. She'd simply been someone who craved control and found a system that rewarded her worst instincts. Sarah took a deep breath and returned to the auditorium where the community was now voting on new transparency measures. There was still much work to be done. Sarah helped the young family navigate the pool app interface while their children fidgeted impatiently in their new swim gear. "It's really that easy?" asked the father, Jason Chen, looking both relieved and skeptical. "No special permissions or board approval needed?" "That's the whole point," Sarah explained. The amenities belong to everyone who pays dues. The system just helps us share fairly. She gestured toward the schedule displayed on his phone. Green slots are available, blue ones are yours, gray ones are booked by others. As the Chen family hurried off to change, Mrs. Abernathy approached with a plate of her famous snickerdoodles, her chihuahua, Mr. Darcy, trotting faithfully at her heels. "You've been giving the grand tour again," the elderly woman observed, offering Sarah a cookie. "Third new family this month." Sarah accepted with a smile. The neighborhood's reputation has changed. People used to avoid Oak Ridge Estates because of the dictator HOA stories. Now we're known for community governance done right. Indeed, real estate values had risen 15% since the Reynolds scandal, despite initial fears that the negative publicity would hurt the neighborhood. Instead, the transparent policies and genuine community involvement had made Oak Ridge Estates a model that other HOAs throughout the county were scrambling to emulate. As Sarah completed her final lap, she noticed Judge Matsuda sitting at the edge of the pool, her feet dangling in the water. "I drove by the Reynolds old house today," the judge said when Sarah approached. "The Chens have planted the most beautiful cherry trees. Spring will be spectacular next year." "Better than security cameras and motion-detecting floodlights," Sarah agreed, wrapping herself in a towel. The judge's expression grew thoughtful. "I saw James yesterday at the courthouse. He was filing paperwork in records, part of his community service hours. He looked different." Sarah had heard through the community grapevine that the Reynolds had divorced during the legal proceedings. Patricia had moved to Arizona after serving 6 months for financial crimes, reportedly attempting to start over with family there. James had served a shorter sentence, his cooperation with investigators earning him leniency. The plea agreements for both included substantial community service and restitution. "Different how?" Sarah asked, genuinely curious. "Humbled, but not broken," Judge Matsuda replied. "He mentioned he's volunteering with a youth outreach program in his off hours, working with at-risk teens." She paused. "Redemption comes in many forms, I suppose." As twilight settled over the pool area, residents began arriving for the monthly community potluck. The Patel family brought homemade samosas, the Rodriguez twins carried trays of empanadas, and old Mr. Finch proudly displayed his award-winning apple pie. Children darted between tables while parents chatted, the conversations flowing as freely as the shared food. Sarah watched as the Chen children cautiously approached a group of neighborhood kids playing Marco Polo in the shallow end. Within moments, they were laughing and splashing, already part of the community. "We've come a long way," said Mrs. Abernathy, suddenly beside her again, "from being afraid to speak up to this." She gestured at the gathering. Sarah nodded, remembering how isolated everyone had been just a year ago, each household suffering Patricia's tyranny alone, afraid to challenge the status quo. "The pool was never just about swimming for me," she admitted. "It was about having one place that felt like mine in a community that didn't feel like ours." "And now?" prompted the older woman. Sarah watched as Jason Chen tentatively approached the grill, offering to help Mr. Finch with the burgers. The older man immediately handed over his prized spatula, a gesture of trust and inclusion that spoke volumes. "Now," Sarah said, smiling as she dipped her toes back into the water, "everything feels like it belongs to all of us, exactly as it should." "I'm sorry, did you say Officer Reynolds was measuring garden gnomes at 3 a.m.? Sarah asked, unable to hide her disbelief. Mrs. Abernathy nodded vigorously, her silver curls bouncing. "Every night for a week after I spoke against Patricia's proposal to ban whimsical lawn decorations." She passed over a flash drive. "My grandson installed these cameras after my car was keyed last year. The timestamp on the video is clear as day, or night, rather." Sarah's living room had transformed into an impromptu command center. Neighbors who had never spoken beyond polite nods now huddled together, comparing notes and experiences. The dining table disappeared beneath stacks of documents, HOA financial statements, citation notices, work orders for community projects that residents had paid for but never materialized. "I've been tracking the pattern of citations," said Raj Patel, a data analyst whose meticulous spreadsheets covered the coffee table. 93% of households that voted against Patricia's proposals received violations within 2 weeks. Only 7% of her supporters ever received citations, despite similar property conditions. Sarah rubbed her temples, the magnitude of the situation becoming clear. This isn't just about pool time or petty harassment. This is systematic abuse of power. Her phone buzzed with a text from Thomas Harrington. Captain Washington from Internal Affairs wants to meet. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. Bring everything. The next morning, Sarah arrived at police headquarters with 3 waterproof document boxes and a portable hard drive. Captain Washington, a formidable woman with silver-streaked braids and a no-nonsense demeanor, listened without interruption as Sarah methodically presented the evidence. "We've been watching Officer Reynolds for some time," the captain admitted when Sarah finished. "There have been complaints about selective enforcement, but nothing disorganized or substantial." She tapped her finger on the garden gnome footage. "Using police resources for personal vendettas is a serious breach of public trust." As Sarah left the building, her phone lit up with notifications. The local news station had picked up the story, not just about the pool confrontation, but about the broader pattern of harassment. A screenshot of Officer Reynolds in uniform threatening Sarah had become the lead image, alongside a smiling photo of Patricia from the HOA website. By mid-afternoon, the story had gone viral. #PoolCop and #HOAKaren trended across social media platforms. Local news vans parked at the Oak Ridge Estates entrance, reporters eager for comments from residents. National outlets began picking up the story as an example of power abuse and community activism. Sarah hadn't anticipated the media frenzy. Her phone rang constantly. Journalists, neighbors, even a producer from a true crime podcast. She declined most calls, focusing instead on organizing the growing mountain of evidence residents continued to bring forward. The most damning material arrived in an unmarked envelope the following day. Inside was a USB drive containing audio recordings of HOA executive sessions, meetings that were supposed to be confidential but were legally required to be recorded. The anonymous note simply read, "I can't be part of this anymore. Meeting room B is bugged by Patricia." Sarah plugged in the drive with trepidation. Patricia's voice filled the room, clear and unfiltered. "So what if the Williamses have a medical hardship case? If we allow one exception to the exterior paint codes, everyone will want one. James can find something on them. Everyone's got skeletons. Check if their college-age son has any outstanding tickets or run his friends' plates when they visit. Something will turn up." Another voice, male, hesitant, responded, "Isn't that illegal? Using police resources that way?" Patricia's laugh was cold. "Please, my husband is the law in this neighborhood. Nobody's going to question an officer conducting routine surveillance in his own community." Now, about those pool renovation funds. Sarah sat motionless, the recording continuing to play as the final pieces fell into place. This wasn't just about harassment or petty power plays. The evidence pointed to conspiracy, corruption, and possible criminal activity. With shaking hands, she forwarded the audio file to Captain Washington, Thomas Harrington, and the county prosecutor. Within an hour, her doorbell rang. On her porch stood Mrs. Abernathy, clutching her chihuahua and a stack of notarized affidavits. "We heard the recordings," the elderly woman said, eyes fierce behind her bifocals. "The whole neighborhood is ready to testify." Sarah's hand trembled slightly as she held her phone, but her voice remained remarkably steady. "Officer Reynolds, I'm recording this interaction for my own protection," she announced, loud enough for the phone's microphone to capture clearly. "Could you please clarify why you're threatening a homeowner with arrest for attempting to use a facility she has legally reserved and paid for through association dues?" The officer's posture stiffened. His hand moved away from his taser, but the damage was done. Both the gesture and his words were preserved in digital evidence. "This isn't a police matter, James," called one of Patricia's friends nervously from the hot tub. "Maybe we should just share the pool?" Patricia shot the woman a glare that could have frozen the heated water. "Absolutely not. This is about respect for authority. She turned to her husband with a saccharine smile. Officer Reynolds is simply responding to a disturbance call, as is his duty. I wasn't aware that standing quietly with a towel constituted a disturbance, Sarah replied, her legal training kicking in. She turned to address the other women directly. Did any of you actually place a 911 call? Because using emergency services for non-emergencies is a misdemeanor in this county. The silence that followed was broken only by the gentle lapping of pool water against the tiles. Officer Reynolds cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the growing audience. Two teenage boys had stopped their basketball game at the adjacent court to watch the confrontation, phones raised. A couple walking their dog had paused by the pool fence, expressions concerned. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to delete that recording," he said, voice lower now. "That would be tampering with evidence of potential police misconduct," Sarah replied evenly. "Now, unless you're placing me under arrest, in which case I'll need to hear my Miranda rights and the specific charge. I believe this conversation is over." For a tense moment, Sarah thought he might actually arrest her. Instead, Officer Reynolds took a half step back, his training apparently overriding his wife's influence. "This is private property," he stated flatly. "The board representative has asked you to leave." "The HOA bylaws, which I've brought a copy of," Sarah said, pulling a folder from her bag, state clearly that no board member may unilaterally deny access to common areas without a formal vote. "I'd be happy to review the section with you. As a law enforcement officer, I'm sure you appreciate the importance of following established rules." Patricia's face contorted with fury. "You think you're so clever with your bylaws and your recordings," she smiled, abandoning all pretense of civility. "Do you have any idea who we are in this community? Who our friends are?" "I know exactly who you are," Sarah replied quietly. "The question is whether you know who I am." The stalemate broke when Elaine Matsuda, the retired judge from Maple Court, approached the gate, swim cap already in place. Sarah recognized her immediately from community meetings, a respected figure even Patricia wouldn't dare challenge directly. "Is there a problem here, officer?" Judge Matsuda asked, her experienced eyes taking in the scene with practiced efficiency. "I notice you're in uniform, but your patrol car is nowhere to be seen. I hope you haven't driven your service vehicle while off duty again." Officer Reynolds paled visibly. "No, ma'am, just checking on my wife." "How thoughtful," the judge remarked dryly. "Since you're here unofficially, perhaps we could all respect the pool schedule." She nodded toward the large clock mounted above the equipment shed. "Sarah's time slot began 4 minutes ago, and I've reserved the lane next to hers for my arthritis exercises." Patricia opened her mouth to protest, but her husband placed a warning hand on her shoulder. With a theatrical sigh, she began gathering her magazines and designer bag. "This isn't over," she muttered as she brushed past Sarah. "You're right about that," Sarah whispered back, hitting the stop button on her recording. "It's just beginning."